So, Alan Smithson, Terry Schussler, thank you so much for joining. Alan is the CEO of MetaVRse, co-founder of the XR Ignite Community Hub, the Hyper Accelerator, and the host of the XR for Business podcast, of which I am the guest on one of them from some period of time ago. I really appreciate you joining. Alan, Terry Schussler, Senior Director of Spatial Computing at Deutsche Telekom, who drives research and creation of spatial computing solutions that leverage the value of 5G on a global basis. I can't thank you enough for joining. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Glad to be here.
Bob, thanks so much for having us, man.
Thanks for joining again, too. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. There you go. Yeah. Let me change my view here.
I can see you. You can still conduct a meeting like this.
I like the googly eyes.
Yeah, the googly eyes are awesome. I'm going to steal that idea and put it on my brand new Vive Focus. Oh, yeah, it's a whole pile of them. That's great.
Oh, yeah, the dollar store.
Yeah.
All right, but seriously.
All right, hold on. Let me get my screen.
Oh, Alan, don't make me go to my shelf, man.
Hey, man.
I've got magenta colored AR glasses. I'm gonna top you.
Yeah. All right.
Have you guys probably didn't see the interview I did with Charlie Fink yesterday?
No.
No.
Watch the first. I'll send you a link. Watch the first 60 seconds. We did a special intro, and it's pretty funny. I'm pretty. Right. My partner Kylie put it together. It's a little Brady Bunch theme thing. So
that's awesome. You know, I have a great picture I'll send you. So. You know how it's kind of a meme, well, for the last year or so, it's been kind of a meme for anybody in XR to put their LinkedIn photo with them sitting in a pose like this with their AR glasses.
Let me act it out for you as you're doing it.
Alan. And so I would make fun of people, right? Because it was like, you have to put the VR device on, like what? Because you own one? I mean, what's the point, right?
Because you're propagating the medium. Come on, man.
So I'm working with a company out of Poland, and they are doing some work with Vuzix blades. So she sends me a picture, and she's got 3 Vuzix blades on her head because she's queuing them up for demos. And she's at Mobile World Congress America like a year ago. So she got one on, another one, right? And so I said, oh, we're going to do that. How about 10 glass? You know the book 10 Apples Up on Top? It's a Dr. Seuss book. It's very famous.
Yeah, yep.
You know, classic with the dog with the apples stacked
I've
up.
got it on my bookshelf. I read it every day.
Yeah. So I go and I grab all my glasses and I stack 10 glasses up, like on my head at once, and I send it back to her. But I do it through it was on LinkedIn, so it got a lot of exposure. And then I started noticing fewer and fewer people wearing those glasses, and they're like their photos were starting to change on LinkedIn. I was like, now I can see your face.
Yeah. Do you have these ones?
Yes, Alan, I have my own pair of those too.
Damn.
What are those?
These are the
North Focals.
Oh, okay. I've got a pair of just glasses.
There you
go. There's a little.
Exactly. There you go, Bob. That's right. Look, it's my invisible. They're so thin they just disappear.
Yeah, but you know, like that's a little projector in there shining off.
Yeah.
Actually, if you look carefully, you can probably see the little projector.
Yeah. Listen, I want to go down the path of talking about those particular glasses.
Hold on. The reason why I bring it up is because I literally interviewed the CTO of this company the other day, and the new version is a much larger field of view, much brighter. And one of the things that I want to talk about is, you know, if we're going to be wearing AR every day, the one thing that they nailed with this, which, you know, it's just a simple user experience thing, but when you're talking to somebody, it recognizes you're having a conversation, and it will turn off all notifications. Because nothing worse than having hold on, let me just check my Apple Watch. You're like, yeah, that's much better than checking your phone. Who cares? You're still, and if the glasses are, I'm looking at you, but I'm not paying attention. I'm like, checking my thing because I got a little ring and I'm checking my messages.
Yeah.
And I tried this, and I was walking down the street, checking my messages because I just got it, and I was like, this is cool. And I almost walked straight into some woman, almost killed her because I was just walking down the street, and even though I can see, my image was blocked. So they have to make sure you don't drive with it too.
Do you remember the BlackBerry commercial? It wasn't a commercial. It was a video with the BlackBerry helmet, and it was a video of a guy walking down a street, looking at his BlackBerry and had a helmet on because he kept bumping into things like low-lying
No,
plans.
you gotta send. I need that video for a presentation I'm doing in a week. I would dig that if you can find that. That's
I will find. It's probably time to bring that back to life and post it again too.
That video will pay you back for my time today.
Awesome.
Video here.
So we'll circle back and do the intro at the end if that's okay, because we're already into it, and I just don't want to break the flow. But Alan, you just talked about notifications in your field of view, and one of the things you talk about in your white paper is, which by the way is fantastic, like really, really great work, guys, pulling all of that together. It's an amazing amount of information. Yeah. It's a mutual love fest. It wasn't me, not me. That's too much work. I don't like to work that hard.
I have to give credit to an incredible team. This was a labor of love for everybody involved. And I want to just, first of all, say thank you to Terry. Terry came up with this idea. He said, holy crap, I can't figure out, my company wants to know what XR platform to use. Do you know? And I said, I have no idea. There's so many of them. And he said, well, we need a way to decipher this. And I said, oh, yes, we do. And then he said, well, I'm going to write one. I said, all right, go write one. And he said, well, no, we're going to write one. I said, all right. So we put together a team of people, and within 3 weeks from that idea to giving it out to the world last week, it was a 3-week period, and a lot of people, there was about 30 people worked on that project. And so thank you to everybody who worked on that project. It was really important. We wanted to get out the message of how you can become more social in a time of social distancing. And what we mean by that is how can you use virtual and augmented reality experiences to have more presence. And that is the one thing that is different than this type of thing. This is great. Zoom calls are fantastic. You can have 100 people on a screen, but there's something visceral about walking around a space when you bump into people and they're like, when they get too close to you, there's actually like, if I did the interview like this, you would think I'm an idiot. But it feels really uncomfortable in VR when people are there. So this visceral sense of presence is something you just cannot get on a 2D thing. It's cool, like, hey, everybody. But being in VR and walking around, and even in AR, when you have 3D things in front of you, and even using the mobile phones that are in your hands to bring in everybody into that experience. Like, you got people in VR, maybe they're doing the design, but everybody's able to see it real time on their phones. And this is truly magnificent. We have right now, and it just so happens the world needs it more than ever right now.
Yeah, I've said for a long time that VR was a technology looking for a problem to solve, and then we woke up one day, and the whole world had a big problem, which was we're all isolated.
Alan, even the act of you trying to point down at me because your video window is up above mine on your screen and it's below me on mine, just that whole, just on a simple level but the
in VR, I can just point at you, and that because I squeezed my trigger and went, and tracked my fingers.
The other big part of it is the meaningfulness now of social presence, because it wasn't as important in business meetings because the knowledge transfer was the predominant, importance. But now we find that in order for us to deal with the sort of claustrophobia, the boredom, the monotonousness of our environments, that we want to not only turn the virtual background on, but to enjoy a virtualized experience where we create a stronger sense of social proximity with others. And in fact, the face-to-face or video meetings, the issue of creating sort of body language or social or emotional, sort of tonality to the experience to add value. It can be replicated pretty darn well now in XR platforms. I mean, some better than others, but we can get to that level of quality of avatar experience and Second Life has an economy centered around, costuming your avatar because it's so quality oriented. That there's a strong economy. I know somebody who makes a full-time living as a clothing designer on Second Life. So, we're at that tipping point, I think, in terms of the quality of the render and the quality of the network connection, that we can really create this sense of social proximity in a digital way, which is a big part of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And another thing that people don't think about is the amount of bandwidth required to host multi-person events on this type of screen, where everybody's capturing 1080p video from their video feeds and uploading it. It's enormous amounts of bandwidth to distribute this video. In virtual worlds, the world's pre-rendered, so you're downloading it once, not re-rendering every time you turn around. It's pre-rendered, the avatars are pre-rendered, and all you're really transmitting is audio and movement data, which turns out to be very little. So you're actually decreasing the amount of bandwidth, and the fidelity of these experiences is really right now only dependent on the devices. And chips like the Qualcomm XR2 coming out will just only amplify these possibilities.
Yeah. So Terry, you work for T-Mobile, and so
actually Deutsche Telecom.
Deutsche Telekom, which is the global brand over T-Mobile, right?
That's correct.
Wait a second. Let's break this down. Don't they own it?
So Deutsche Telekom is the parent company, T-Mobile. We're the majority shareholder, even after the acquisition of Sprint.
Got it.
But it's a separate. It still is a separate organization, though.
Separate business. Yeah.
Gotcha. So you're up in the mothership.
Yeah.
So T-Mobile and Sprint, they merged, and they're going to be one organization then?
Yes, they are. They are now. Actually, as of April 1st, the new T-Mobile is officially, in existence, and it's all one company now.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, incredible. And so you guys are doing a lot in 5G. How is 5G going to impact, not just VR, AR, MR, XR, but even these types of experiences and this whole kind of new virtual world that we're living in?
So, I mean, we focus a lot on the value proposition of 5G being, tied to bandwidth, but it's a lot more than that. And I think that there's, factors of quality of service is really important. Knowing that you're going to have a consistent connection, especially when you put it under stress loads like we're doing now with 4G radio. The network demands are multiple times higher bandwidth consumption than ever before, to the point where you even see people turning off video in video conference calls simply because they know that their network connections aren't going to be able to handle it. So 5G will certainly, allow for a better, more consistent and fluid experience. The reliability will become a big payoff. Another big part of it is latency on the network. So especially important, not so much for video calls, because it's relatively okay to have that kind of noticeable audio or video latency hiccups where the video stalls. We've probably seen it a couple times just in our call today. But when you go to a virtualized world, your physical position relative to somebody else matters. If you go to high five them spatially, the latency is going to matter more there. And so, we give a bunch of benefits to the network through 5G radio in terms of improved latency. The other big one is the advent of edge computing, which actually acts as a kind of a stepping stone or a bridge between 4G and 5G, because what it does is it adds some of those value propositions to the network. It puts computing closer to the user on the network. So instead of having to wait for your data to go all the way from your phone through an insane route on the network,
China, if you're on Zoom, right?
Right. I mean, the insane route, by the way, to give people an example, is if I'm in Austin, Texas, and I want to connect to a server in San Jose, California, my data route is going to take me through New York. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense, right? So that so what edge compute does is it basically says we're going to map out where all the network computing infrastructure is physically, and then when you need some service, we're going to find the piece of equipment that's physically closest to you right now, and spin up the services on that part of the network. And give your application a much shorter path to get its data to that server, get the computation done, and get the results. And it makes a huge difference especially for XR applications. If you talk about these collaboration platforms, AR, VR ones, the latency in the network is going to become very powerful. And the other big sort of current really key thing about edge computing is that we're focusing a lot on is the rendering. So the quality of the render that we get on the device is based on the computational, the CPU, GPU functionality of the device itself. And even with the XR2 chip, there's still going to be limitations in terms of how many polygons, how high resolution the experience can be. If we can move some of that off the device to the network where we can have higher end GPU rendering that, we can offload the compute load. We can also compute images and render results that are way higher than we could ever put on the device. So that means that the devices can be lighter, they can be able to run on battery for a lot longer period of time. So we can go from 2 hours to 4 hours to 8 hours. And it means that the quality of the experience also goes up because now we're putting a 50 million, a 500 million polygon render in real time coming down to your device as a video stream instead of being computed on the device itself. And
wow.
another thing that people complain a lot about is heat, right? Because if you wear these headsets for these, like most people, it's been a novelty thing. I'm going to pop on my Oculus Go and I'm going to play blackjack for a little while. I'm going to watch a short form film or whatever. But when you put on a VR headset for 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 hours, or an AR headset, the heat is going to become bothersome. And everybody complains every day about it.
High-end content too. The higher end content you push, the more you're pushing the CPU. Actually, it's interesting, the Magic Leap, I was thinking about as you're talking about it, Magic Leap, got rid of that problem by putting the
on the
CPU on a separate device altogether.
Right.
But this thing still gets hot. So
yes,
you've got displays, and so the more graphics you push out to these things, the more they're driving them. And so Terry, here's a question. Let's say, for example, in best case scenario, we want to take some of the rendering power off of a device and put it in, even on a mobile device on your phone, we could have stunning, like, holy crap, wow, AR experiences that, exist on the web because the rendering power is in the cloud and dropping it down, or in the edge rather. So what are the how much can we take off the device? Like, are we talking 25% of the load, or depends on the, use case?
I think we're still learning about that. For example, in DT in Germany, we've deployed edge compute infrastructure across the whole country fairly recently. So we're now experimenting with that. We've reduced the latency in the network to an average of around 30 milliseconds.
From what?
From 52, 53, somewhere around there. So it's a pretty significant drop. But we're going to, if we were to double the number of data centers that we currently have that provide edge compute infrastructure in Germany, we can get that down to under 15. Okay, and we get down to under 15, we can start doing VR streaming off of the cloud. We could take the entire render off the device and do all of it on the cloud.
And then it's the same client.
So what does that do to the price of the devices then?
Well, I mean, I think that the devices have some, fixed BOM costs for the chipsets that are being used to do the compute. They'll probably end up putting that money into the display elements of the device. So I think it'll probably keep the devices at roughly the same cost.
But just much higher fidelity.
But much higher quality, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And smaller.
And so before we move off of 5G, Terry, is this going to accelerate? Is the pandemic going to accelerate the rollout? Because I know the rollout's expensive. I've heard $5 trillion globally, and now I'm starting to understand why, because it's a paradigm shift. It's not just a new freaking frequency. Like, this is an entirely new infrastructure and network topology that you guys are building. Is it going to accelerate, or is it just so much work it's going to take the time it takes?
I think my take globally is that there was a lot of capacity in a lot of countries, and we call it dark fiber. So there's a lot of unlit fiber where fiber strands. You have a core bundle of 256 fiber strands. Maybe a quarter, a third of that was being used at any given period of time, and now it's like all being used. So that's an important differentiation, right? That's the volume of consumption is now going to stay sustained at a higher level, and it'll continue to go. So I think that's going to push the value proposition of bandwidth from being cool to must have, because it's cool that I could download, the classic example of what will 5G do? Well, now you can download an entire movie in 1.2 seconds, or some random number. that's kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool, but does it really matter? I can't watch it that fast. So if it took 30 seconds versus 1.2 seconds versus 5 minutes, it doesn't matter. But there will be a lot of things, again, reliability, right? We have an entire university class of 100 students trying to watch a professor's lecture and interact with them in real time in a collaborative way, not just sitting back and watching video, but doing something, working on a lab project together in a virtual way, that all of that's going to matter. So I think it'll accelerate the demand for it. Now, will it accelerate the build out, the investment? Probably not, because there's some practical logistics involved in building out the network that's not going to change. And in fact, I think that's probably been hurt. I think you're going to see a slowdown in the rollout of 5G as a result of this.
Supply chain disruptions and stuff like that.
Absolutely, especially equipment.
For some reason.
Equipment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry?
See people burning them for some reason?
Yeah.
No, that's just, there's always going to be wackadoodles out there. And I'm not really worried about that. But I think yeah, and by the way, 5G masks don't fly by themselves through the air spraying viruses. Okay, so sorry, it's just not real. I think
that the Earth isn't flat.
Yeah, I think so one of the areas we've been focusing a lot on is in 5G campus, which is the idea of taking a corporation ecosystem infrastructure and building a private network out for them, but using 5G radio to create what's called a private slice. So there's a part of the network that's just private to them, and then the public slice where the data can go outside of that. And so there's security issues, there's reliability of service issues where we're looking for, on the private slice, we want to have like log4 quality, uptime on the network, like which means basically you can go down once a year. That's that level of quality. And so I think that corporations will be embracing the demand for that a lot more rapidly. And so I think you'll see a much more rapid 5G campus build out as a result of the coronavirus.
Yeah, cool.
So are you saying, sorry, Terry, are you saying the campuses are inherently have that ability? So when you spin up a campus, you have the ability to carve out certain...
Yeah, so DT actually has a 5G campus team, and we work with our large enterprise customers, and we put 5G radio on their campus, on their physical campus. We set up local edge compute infrastructure. We give them a guaranteed service level agreement. And then we also set up a private mobile network for their phones users so that everybody has a really high reliable, highly performant network on campus. And then they have a public slice that they can connect to as well when they need to move data out of the network.
Wow.
Cool. Now, Alan, you said earlier, you alluded to this in the white paper. You say that, the VR blocks out distractions. And you also showed this, was it the Nreal or which was the headset you showed that had the camera?
This one here is the North glasses, but the Nreals, the Nreals are...
And the North glasses, like, it shuts off the display when it recognizes that you're actually in a conversation with somebody, right?
It just doesn't allow for messaging, I don't know how it just doesn't message you.
Yeah, and so I'm curious about, in overall, especially in VR, with Facebook owning Oculus, right? And investing maybe more money in this space on the VR side than anybody else. And Mark Zuckerberg's stated intention to get 1 billion people into virtual reality by some date. And then being a media platform, and they profit on our distraction, right? That's like all of their revenue really essentially comes from that. How long before people are browsing Facebook and their Instagram feeds in their headsets and buying Apple Watch bands with one click and actually ignoring what's going on? Because that's a future that I see as clear as day. How do you see that?
It depends on how long this pandemic goes on for.
Yeah.
If this thing goes on forever where we have to stay in our houses for years, then people are either going to go crazy or they're going to get VR because you're going to want an escape. And beyond that, the enterprise applications for this are so compelling. There are things you cannot do in any other medium, especially with social distancing. But even now, like even if it takes, maybe this thing's over next month, we find a cure, we got a vaccine, awesome. The economy still needs to pick up. And are you going to get on a plane with a bunch of people immediately? No, it's going to take some time. And so we're going to need these tools right now. So we have to fix the supply chain of the headsets. We have to be able to get them. We have to have specific versions of them. I know Oculus has their Oculus for Business ISV kind of thing where they have a version of it. But organizations are not going to want to share their data with Facebook. So you're going to have lots of vendors that are providing these. They have to be readily available, and the content has to be there. So right now with the XR Collaboration Platform Guide that we built, the Global Resource Guide, there's all the tools you would need to select the right vendor for you. And what the next phase of this is how do you select the right vendor? How do I know? I want to have a meeting for 5 people. And the thing is, my requirements today, maybe I want to have a meeting for 5 people and I just want to have everybody around the room and look at our product demonstration in VR. That's today. Tomorrow, I want to have an auditorium with 100 people and 3 keynote speakers from around the world. The next day, I want to do something else. And so this is going to be an ongoing theme where, one solution isn't a fit-all solution for everybody. So we wanted to create, the tool to give you, here's how if you really want to do a meeting, you can scroll to that part of the thing, figure it out. But then we're also making an online tool that will allow you to select your features that you want, and will shortlist those companies into a list that's manageable. So here's these 5 ones, you can evaluate them in your own. And everything we're doing is trying to look at it from a completely unbiased eye so that it delivers just the maximum value to businesses and organizations looking to leverage this technology now.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is that companies are going to deploy to their employees headsets with a bespoke feature set that they can control what type of media goes on there, at least in the short term, right?
Yeah,
at some point, like they used to do that with laptops too, right? But now everybody's got their own. There was a whole thing around bring your own device,
right.
And once BYOD kind of blew up that whole custom closed infrastructure because IT managers realized that they were spending a shit ton of money that they didn't really need to spend, and they sacrificed security and they sacrificed a bunch of stuff for cost. Like, we're going to see that in this economy too. IT managers are going to be looking at, do I really need to spend all of this money for new infrastructure? At some point, people are going to have their own headsets, like we all have our own phones and our own laptops. And so
we have a problem in our house. So we have 2 Quests. We got a bunch of other stuff, but the Quests are the ones we use most because they're just easy. And we have 4 people in our family now who are going in VR. And, I'll go in all space and my avatar looks like my daughter because she borrowed my headset. I gotta go. These are little things, but they're very annoying. And there's no way for me to go in and sign in as my own thing. And it goes, it recognizes my retinas and go, okay, Alan, you're secure to represent your avatar in this virtual world of business. If I'm going to go into a business meeting and my avatar looks like me, my voice sounds like me, but I'm not me, and somebody picked up my desk thing, put it on their head and joined a meeting with it. These are some of the ththings that we need to address. We're getting there, but there's a ton of things to be addressed, and one by one, everybody's addressing them. Like, there was over 100 companies that we identified that are offering this type of service. And
that's crazy.
Every feature that you want, they all have some of them.
So that was one of my questions: is what are the key features that are table stakes that you have to have, and then what are the features that you really wish everybody had that they haven't got to yet? The key ones that are missing.
I mean,
that's a great question.
For me, it's capacity. I think the number one factor in deciding which tool you're going to use starts with how many users can be on at the same time interacting in a space, in a room, and can I mirror those rooms to expand capacity? That becomes sort of the secondary question. For me, I think a lot of things fall from that. I mean, we're still sussing out for our interactive tool exactly what's the right questionnaire flow, but if I look at it as that comes before I even ask you, well, what do you want to do in that event? Because if I can't support X number of users, then I can rule out a whole bunch of tools right off the bat. And it gets to be a problem because even for video conferencing solutions, we're starting to see this. I did a webinar last week, and I won't mention the name of the tool, but it has a limit of about 500 users in the package that the hosts had, and we pegged it out. And the reason we pegged it out is because they were underestimating the percentage of registrations that would move on to the live event. And so the traction on these kinds of activities is really high right now. And there's a lot of learning right now about where tools work and they don't work, where the security factors come in, you know, Zoom bombing, learning how to deal with, Alan, you know, brings up the idea of a shared device and you know, nobody has shared cell phones. You know, I don't log into my cell phone with different users. It's one user, one phone. And right now all the headsets are the same way. So there's a lot of new thinking that's going to come.
That's not the way companies are using them. They're using them.
I know that. And in fact, so there's an interesting problem there, right? So I've done, you know, projects where we're trying to move, you know, into large scale pilots or even delivery. And one of the issues comes up is the CapEx cost of the hardware. And so we start to, you know, if I have 3,000 people that are going to be using the solution that's being built, that's 3,000 times X dollars or euros, you know, in order to monetize that. That's a big CapEx cost. So we start to model like, well, what if we got one device for every 3 users, every 5 users? And then there's a bunch of other issues that come up with shared device usage, which have to do with like prescription inserts or, you know, responsibility or things like that, right? But here's the interesting thing, and Alan might, you know, relate to this. In the new world that we've now entered, sharing devices is going to be highly unlikely.
Yep.
Because nobody's going to want to borrow a cell phone from anybody else. Nobody's going to want, especially take a head-worn device that an arbitrary person, even in their family maybe, has used and put it on their head because they don't know how hygienic that person has been, and they don't know if they have an issue. And so now that sensibility of personal hygiene has become topic number one globally in an instant. And so, you know, so being able to clean your device is becoming a high priority. I advise a company called Cleanbox.
I was literally going to say it spawned a company to
it did. But I also think that I think that when companies look at the risk factors involved in having to deal with shared device usage, there's going to be a lot more leaning to, you know what, we'll just get everybody their own device. Yeah. And the interesting thing is, I think the volume of devices, because of that and because of just the overall demand for the functionality of them, I think we're going to see a 10x number in 1 year on the total number of VR devices that have been sold. I think the number is going to be outrageously high.
I think you would be right if we could actually buy them.
If we could make them. Right. But I know for a fact that there are new factories, entire new factories being built by companies I can't name, just to make more of them at the velocity that they're projecting. Fantastic. I would easily say that once the velocity of manufacturing accelerates, within a year from now, we'll go back and see a 10x number.
Yeah, I know a half a dozen people myself personally that want a Quest and can't buy it. Won't pay the premium on eBay from the scalpers, right? So they're waiting, and so I think now obviously we're all in a little bit of a VR bubble, so we know a lot of people that want things. But so all right, so concurrency of users is a big key. What are the other things that, you know, that people just like almost they're must-haves that you just aren't seeing yet?
Photorealistic
text input. Cool. Text input is a huge nightmare in VR.
I saw a really cool one for that the other day.
Yeah, but it is a problem. It is a significant problem right now that the biggest problem is the input modalities aren't fully blended, and so we have accessibility issues for people who have handicaps. We have, you know, left hand, right hand, two hand. We have the lack of proper text input. Speech recognition is still kind of vaguely supported in some of the platforms to act as an alternative. So in general, the blending of input modalities is a big pain point, and it needs to be much more frictionless, fluid sort of physical interaction system. So hand gesture adds a lot, but the implementation of hand gestures is still very nascent. And so,
why are we still looking for text input in this new, you know, spatial computing world? Should we just leave that behind?
No, because sometimes you're in a social experience right now, and you know, maybe I want to type somebody a message while I'm talking to you. I don't know. This is how we work. We like to do this.
I should be able to just whisper in your ear. Like, I think we need to let go. The problem is with all of these new technologies, we hold on to the old paradigms because we don't know any better and we're stuck in it. And the idea of text input in VR to me is actually like one of those things. It's like, why a virtual keyboard? Yeah, text to speech is going to get better. right?
But as much as we try, we can't talk out of both sides of our mouth at the same time, really.
Some people do. Have you ever seen a politician? Wait a second.
Yeah, but my point is that maybe Kevin Nealon, okay, he's probably the only person I can think of. But the point I'm making there is it's an input modality blend, right? So we're talking here, and while we're talking, you can't see my hands, but I'm having a private chat with somebody about information that they need. So
maybe handwriting comes back. Maybe we go back to handwritten notes. That we can send people little stickies that pop up in their field of view. Sorry, we're doing product innovation now. That's not what we're about. But
so you asked about the features that people want most. Handwriting in there is another one. So being able to draw and write up on a whiteboard. So you nailed that, because being able to write up on a whiteboard is a feature. I need to be able to use a pen and write it. I need to be able to.
I think people designing XR experiences should go scuba diving. Because one of the things, like when you're underwater, it's like just to change your mind around what types of communication modalities are possible when you take away, right? And they have these little chalkboard, these little boards you can write on, right?
So imagine that I've got my phone, right, as my primary communication device. Now imagine I fully integrate the concept of the phone into a VR experience. I virtualize the entire phone. So I can take a call in VR. My character is rendered on the other end as an avatar. And I have a FaceTime call with somebody, or my notifications, all that sort of stuff, but also content. This is a content creation tool. It's the most powerful content creation tool we all have. So I want to be able to fluidly move the content from my phone into my VR, AR user experience. And most of the tools don't do a good job of that. They don't make it very easy for me to just grab arbitrary pictures and stuff and in a spatial way, kind of interact with the content here in my XR experience. And so I think virtualizing the phone is going to be a really interesting flow of opportunity for allowing the content of the phone itself to be accessible in that space. Because I literally have a phone, I can reach in, I can pull content out of it, spatially, and throw it at people and stick it up on a whiteboard, and that level of integration.
So the way to do that actually would be on the phone itself, would be to create a barcode that would be recognized by the cameras, so that it would then overlay a digital version of that, and you could still interact with your phone, because your phone would be sending the Bluetooth signal back and forth. So in your real world, you're touching the phone, but there's nothing on your screen except for a barcode to keep it tracked.
Alan, you're so 1990s with barcodes.
We'll call them spatial anchors. That's the new hip term for barcodes. Spatial anchors.
Yeah, exactly.
Phone's ringing.
So, all right. So the other thing you mentioned is realistic avatar.
Another way to do it, then I'm all ears.
Yeah. So one of the other things you talked about is realistic avatar. So what's happening in that space? Why are they important? Who's doing the best work there? I know there's some research coming out of Oculus Labs, which is like frightening. There's also some downsides, which I want to talk about too.
So avatar realism is super important, especially for certain user classes. So where it becomes important in my mind is, first of all, for large business, top echelon, corporate board meetings, things like that. The CEO of a company is not going to want to look like a cartoon character when they're in a meeting, a serious business meeting. So their presence, their physical presence, the size of their avatar relative to other people, the environment in which they're presenting needs to look on brand. It needs to feel like the place it physically represents, and they need to look like the person that they physically are. And so the quality level demand expectation of not only avatars, but the entire environment presentation is super high up on that food chain. I also think there's the personalization aspect. So the percentage of the population of the world that have been in VR is, like log4 fraction, right? So it's like, 0.0001% or less. But the reality is we bring more people on, the desire for personalization, the requirements, it can't be just like a Wii system. It needs to be really permutationally different. And it's interesting because you don't really need a lot to do that. If you look at Pokemon Go as a good reference, their character costuming, if you look at the different categories and the level of depth, they have like a fraction of what you would find in a video game like Red Dead Redemption, right, or Skyrim or something, where character personalization is super high end, super important. That gaming, especially RPG gaming, that gaming character representation needs to be in VR. And people want to be able to not only do that, but they want to blend that with a representation of who they really look like.
So I'm going to call out a platform. I know you guys don't like to do that, but I don't really have sponsors, so I can say whatever the hell I want. And so the Engage platform, which I want to ask you guys about, that HTC Vive did use for their developer conference. I went in to customize my avatar, and I've got long hair, and the only way I could have long, and that's kind of like how people recognize me now. And so the only way I could have long hair was having a female avatar, and I'm like, what tone deaf asshole created that avatar system, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I used to have long hair longer than yours, so I get it.
Long hair is not a thing. It is very nice hair, though, Bob.
Thank you.
Oh yeah.
Thank you. You should see my boobs it
works really well against a virtual background, by the way.
Well, I'll put it this way: on the Engage platform, Julie and I were part of the thing called Educators in VR. There was about 5,500 people that met over a course of a week. It was a week-long conference. Terry was speaking. Bob, did you? I think you were a part of it as well.
I didn't.
It was a bunch of people getting together to talk about education. And so Julie, my wife, and I. We were actually interviewed by Steve Bambury, education specialist in Dubai. He's in Dubai. We're in our, upstairs and downstairs in our house, and we're on the moon with 50 people from around the world in Engage. Now, the avatars, I went and did my whole avatar thing, and I looked as close to me as I could look as a blocky, character. But when I showed up on camera, when I watched the videos, I was orange, and Julie was gray. And
now look.
Nothing like each other, so it was
and
weird.
I will say, I think they actually have the best facial system, the ability to create a customized avatar that's actually functional in VR that I've seen. I haven't done as many platforms as you guys have. So who else is doing really good work in the avatar space that you could use today? And who's doing the most amazing work behind the scenes that you know of that's going to change that in the future?
It's somewhat, as Alan mentioned earlier, it's somewhat a function of the device and the support of the device to track lower face, lower body, and hands and create presence that way. So it's not just, if you're just talking about your face, that's one thing. If you're talking about the entire body, that's another, right? So I would kind of separate the two a little bit.
Yeah.
Spatial does a good job, especially in AR and cross platforms, providing a really good avatar representation. But I think there's a long way to go. We're at the cartoon stage still. Even if you look at the gap between what Spatial offers and alt space VR, which is very cartoony, if you go past Spatial, there's another level that's coming very soon that is totally photorealistic. So part of that is working on the photo. If you look at the capture studios, so there's very few. A year and a half, 2 years ago, there was like 6 capture studios around the world. And they cost like $25,000 a minute to use them. We've seen in the last year rapid evolution on using depth camera, time of flight systems, Connect, the phone,
the new iPhone camera, the one in the iPad, right?
On the iPad, and so it's getting commoditized. And as that commoditization happens, I think we will see front-facing, capture. We can put the phone on a mount. I can see that I'm aiming it the right way, and I can create a holographic capture, a photogrammetry capture of myself very, very inexpensively. It'll be service-based. We're doing some experiments in Germany where you'll be able to walk into a store, get a full photogrammetry capture of yourself, and then we'll auto-animate that as an experiment. We're looking at how we can flow that character content into avatars in platforms. So there's rapid movement on that, and I think over just this year, you'll see it reach a point by the end of the year where you're like, wow, that's me in VR, that's me in AR. I look like I'm standing right in front of you right now. So I don't think it's that far away. The issue is the cost to get the capture done, the cost to get the capture done, and to reduce the polygon level of that and rig it properly for the platforms. The platforms are still at a very nascent stage of having that integration from third parties who have all of that photogrammetry knowledge and have the understanding how to build those systems. So they're not tackling that problem completely. They're just doing the low-hanging fruit stuff they can get away with. with the platforms that are going to win are the ones that open up to third parties through an API system to allow a bunch of different avatar pipelines to come into their platform and provide that kind of functionality. And then it's a total game changer, because now I'm not just trying to create realism. Again, like I said earlier, Second Life created a whole monetization platform around that. I think there's a huge business opportunity, not only on avatars, but also the environments. Because if you look at the Engage conference you talked about, the quality, the production quality was like Hollywood, you know.
Yeah.
The one was great. They had jets flying over. And,
I know, and the train coming through the screen. I mean, some of that stuff was really powerful.
They had the coronavirus. So they were doing a 2D presentation, and all of a sudden the coronaviruses start coming out, you know, these big viruses, and everybody their whole avatars turned into bodysuits. So everybody looked at was wearing a bodysuit, and if you looked at your hands, you're in a body. That was amazing. And that's something you could never even imagine in real life.
So let's talk about that for a second, because you guys have gone to a bunch of these conferences now, and the differences between, because I want to talk about conferences and trade shows next. And so the difference between presenting on stage, you guys have all, you know, been on big stages and spoken at conferences, and presenting in VR. What are the key differences now that you've watched it, you've done some of it, that you need to bring to that presentation? Because I'm about to do one at Laval Virtual next week. And you know, so if nothing else, selfish request, what should I do differently than I might normally do on stage?
Well, first of all, you won't have to get on a flight and waste a week of your life not around your family to spend an hour on stage. That's first. That to me is like, I did a presentation for people all around the world from my living room, and I didn't have to disrupt my life to do it. It was amazing to me. And I think you're going to see a lot more people realize the potential of that, because it just feels right. Second of all, you have the ability to change the entire environment and alter the environment. So one of the presentations I saw recently was this woman, she was talking and she was giving a keynote, and all of a sudden a tree started growing out of the stage, and she started talking about the tree growing, and the tree just kept growing the whole presentation slowly. And then something else appeared over here, and you have the ability to bring 3D objects in and then have them interact, and you cannot do that on a regular stage.
So that's a new skill set we're going to have to learn beyond PowerPoint, is 3D.
Three-dimensional PowerPoint.
Yeah, well, actually, I think thinking spatially is really the big thing, both as a consumer and a presenter and just understanding it. Is because people ask me, like, what is spatial computing? I'm sort of, you know, trying to basically say the real world becomes your display and interaction space. So there's no screen anymore. It's just everything you see, you touch. It might be digital, it might be physical, but the flow of physical interaction is the same. So when I think in terms of presenting, you know, one of the things for me, it's really important to always show what good looks like. So when I present, I actually use AR all the time. I do my presentations in AR live on stage, and or I use AR glasses, or both. And for me in VR, it's important that you show the value of spatial context. And, you know, like I see people that put one video display up, like one PowerPoint deck up in VR. Why? Why not have like 5 slides side by side? Why not keep content referential? Maybe have a scrolling set of the last 5 slides, so people don't have to hurry up and read the slide before the next one comes in. They can process information in a different way. So you're manipulating time and space. Think about that. Time and space as a dimension of interaction in VR that you can't do in the real world with a 2D screen of content flow coming from video. And
yeah, interesting. So it's not just physical dimensions; it's the time dimension can change in spatial computing. Wow,
also,
that's right.
You could give the rights of that presentation up to that slide to the person individually. So individually, they could put the slides up. So
think about how this is one of the funniest things I ever see when I present at a conference. I'm doing presentation, and there's somebody in the audience, and they're doing this, and they're zooming, click, and then another slide comes up, click, right, over and over again, click. So imagine that they can just reach out and grab the slide and stick it in their phone or in their pocket or their virtual phone.
As a speaker, though, that's how you know you're on point, is watching all the people take pictures of your slides. How am I going to get that feedback?
But the thing is that they're focusing on taking the picture because they have to rezoom and frame the thing. So there's so much muscle repetitive effort doing that. They're not thinking about what you're talking about. Trust me, because I've asked people.
So Terry, in 3 dimensions, in spatial computing, you'll be able to point at the slide, save the slide. Now, you as a presenter know how many people downloaded.
Sure, you get the analytics.
You get the analytics. How do you know how many people? I think there was 6 people that held up their phone. Maybe. I can't see because the shine.
It's real time. I mean, you can get real time analytics on the engagement with your content while you're presenting.
Up in your headset.
Awesome. You can vote. That's something I haven't seen in a platform as a voting, upvoting and downvoting.
Well, yeah. I mean, the idea of Slido being integrated into a VR experience would be brilliant.
Yeah.
Nobody's done it. I don't think
anybody's watching that are making XR collaboration platforms, Slido built in.
Yeah.
So Las Vegas is shut down, right? Which the whole city literally is shut down. No conferences, no tourism or anything. Mobile World Conference was kind of like, I think, one of the big ones to fall. I assume Terry, DT was going to have a big presence there.
Oh yeah, huge.
How are you guys dealing with the lack of conferences now and trade shows, and how is XR going to enable that to continue or to change into something better?
It's still ongoing discussion, to be honest. When MWC was canceled, it's our biggest show of the year, and we were one of the last telcos to kind of say no, even though we were in planning for saying no a long time. We rapidly put together a one-day event at our headquarters, and we had our own. We basically took all the key things that we wanted to share with the press and media that we had focused on for MWC. We showcased that at a private event in our headquarters. Wasn't the same. I mean, it was cool that we were able to do it, but it was definitely not the same. It's difficult in a meta way to translate some of our XR showcases into a VR or XR experience. Like, you can't always easily marry this technology innovation project with a commodity platform and showcase it inside of that. So, do we make videos and then we show the videos? It's really hard, because you lose that sort of that realism of the touch, the feel, the spatial experience of it. Which is why a lot of people say don't make videos of XR experiences. Whereas I think spectator view is super important. If I've got 20 people in a room, one person's wearing a VR headset, the other 19 better be watching spectator view, or I'm making a big mistake. So I think that for us, it's really a challenge, at least in terms of XR stuff that we want to showcase in XR. Other things that we're doing that are not that meta kind of approach, they're fairly readily movable. I mean, we're starting to think about that in terms of our content production pipelines. You used to always think about print, then web, then interactive, then video. So now it's another delivery medium, which is XR. So how do we prep our content for delivery as VR as an output, in addition to all the standard ones? We're constantly thinking about how to make that flow more effective.
Now, Alan, you talk to a lot of companies about this, I'm sure. What are other companies doing around their conference and exhibition strategies?
This is the world I came from. I used to own an AV company and a DJ company, so we came from the live events. And I think everybody's freaking out right now, because imagine if your entire business just stopped one day, like everything, which is everybody right now. But I don't think they're just, everybody threw everything on Zoom because it was available and ready, and everybody has the devices. So, even if I wanted to do a conference for 1,000 people and say, look, it's $1,000 conference, and I'm going to ship you a headset, and we're all going to do that. There's a maximum of 1,000 people. It's $1 million conference. I'm going to bring in the top speakers and do a conference. I'm going to ship you a headset, ready to go. You put it on, you're ready to go. Even if I wanted to do that, I can't. The headsets can't ship. This is where we are right now. We have a golden opportunity in one hand and no possibility in the other. So
companies like Freeman and GES, right, the big global trade show companies, those guys have all just shut down. They're going to have to develop new skill sets in this space in the future. What are those skill sets?
Yeah, so Freeman, Freeman, I believe, and there's one other one.
GES was the other one.
But there's another one, FMAV. They've created their own XR collaboration platform. They did this before. They were already anticipating things would go this way. So I think what we're going to see is those big companies that are dependent on these things, like the big trade show conference companies, they're going to be scrambling right now. And maybe there's an opportunity for us as kind of advisors to the industry to help them acquire or partner with, you know, some of these 100 platforms that we've identified. So what are your needs, and match make that. But that's really what this platform of, you know, the XR collaboration platform was for, was to be that matchmaker in an, you know, in an unbiased way, and let them do whatever they do.
I would say there's kind of a marrying going on here. So I think there'll be a lot of roll up in the next 6 to 12 months on the XR collaboration tools. They'll acquire each other, and some big companies will come in and make a play in that space. I had said the day that I heard Sansar VR was up for sale, and I posted this on LinkedIn, that somebody should buy that. It was the thinking about this that started the conversation that I had with Alan to create this guide. I said somebody should buy Sansar VR and pivot them into a conferencing tool. So right now, very few of the tools are really good at doing conferencing. And even the ones that are okay at it are just okay at it, and they can't handle scale. That's one of the biggest problems they have. So that will have to rapidly change. And I don't think that the companies that are the exhibition companies are going to make it themselves. So they're going to end up being one of these buyers that roll up some of the companies that have the tech to provide a commercial solution in that space.
I know
a big business opportunity.
Like Oracle, SAP, you know, these companies are looking at it as well. Salesforce, I'm sure, is looking at it. Like there's going to be a roll up for sure, and the demand for these is only going to go up from here. Like we're at the very beginning,
and I think there's going to be a meta opportunity for DIY conferencing. So right now, I was on a planning call with an organization that's been around for a few years, who had done in-person events. And they're in the XR space. I want to name who they are, but you know, they're struggling trying to figure out, like, how do we actually build an online version of our conference that's accessible in XR and not in XR, that runs on Mac and Windows and runs in AR and VR devices. There aren't any good solutions that kind of hit that breadth of delivery, and so their compromise model was, let's build a VR lobby, but then we'll take them to Zoom meetings. And I'm like, you know, I get it, but man, you just, you know, that's what we can do right now. Like, that's as far as we can comfortably, reliably make it work. But there's still problems because we can't get everybody in the lobby at the same time, and you have to queue people into it, and right? So, so these guys that are dealing with events that handle 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 people coming at one time. I mean, think about the logistics headaches in the real world. Now put that in digital and figure out, they're going to have to get skill sets that are totally different about how to, you know, orchestrate and manage people in a virtual space. You know, like because I actually, for this conference that I'm doing, I volunteered to be the info booth guy in the lobby. Cool. So that's my role. I'm going to be the guy you come to and say, I don't know where to go. I'm lost. How do I do this? Cool. I'm going to be the guy. So
virtual tour guide.
So these kind of new roles, like new job positions, which is, you know, avatar creation specialist, you know, trade show booth creator, you know, all of those things. Those guys that are running these conference events are going to have to identify and staff and train people to have these new digital skill sets that are totally different than the real world ones.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. Guys, literally, we could do this for all day long, but I want to be really respectful to your time. I know, Terry, you said you had some time, and Alan, it's probably time for a second glass of wine in Toronto.
You know, I'm enjoying my first class. This is a great conversation, so thank you, Bob, for putting it together.
My pleasure. And by the way, I just want you to know, we're going to be doing a virtual wine tasting with a friend of mine, Ross Halleck from Halleck Vineyards, coming up. I think it's going to be on May 8th. And he's got a world-class sommelier is going to be there. We're going to be teaching people how to do wine tastings. And you know, I'm fascinated by how companies are staying connected to their customers and coming up with creative ways of using these tools to stay relevant and in the zeitgeist. And so, and you guys are on the forefront of bringing people the information they need to evaluate the tools, to figure out how to live in this, you know, in this new virtual reality that we found ourselves dropped into because of the pandemic. So I can't thank you on behalf of the entire world. And I know that might sound overly dramatic, but I think the work you're doing actually is that important. You know, not to diminish the work that the healthcare workers are doing on the front line, but we do have to have a meaningful life. We got to come on the back end of this, and things are going to change. And I thank you.
I appreciate that. You know, I feel very fortunate to be at a place in time with the skill set where I can have positive value and influence on as many people as possible. And so this, like, I feel like my whole career kind of culminated in this moment of opportunity and a moment of truth for me. And so, you know, I'm like very dedicated for the rest of this year to continue to really do everything I can to help society kind of lift up in an emotionally positive way, in a culturally and socially positive way. And you know, be able to actually, I think, ultimately communicate better than we have in the past. Much more, you know, family oriented, much more, you know, community oriented, much more social with our business partners. And I think it's going to be a positive outcome, although it's, you know, obviously a difficult flow to get there.
And Alan, the work that you're doing with young companies and startups with your accelerator and stuff is so critical at this time, because all of this innovation is coming from startups that need guidance and advice and capital. And I think the work you're doing with the small business community in the XR space is so valuable. Thank you.
Well, we're going to be ramping it up as well. So really, thanks, Terry. We're going to be ramping it up. We actually had a meeting today, and I was on a Zoom call yesterday with 100 people. And they broke people out into these breakout rooms randomly. But what I want to do, we're trying to figure out how do we not randomize it and say, okay, we're going to have, you know, 10 of the mentors from XR Ignite on the call. And everybody, we're going to have like a, you know, State of the Union. Hey, thank you for coming. You know, you were here to learn from you. And we want to then break out the startups, and they get to choose which mentor they join in. And then they go into a little breakout, and they can ask the mentor anything, and really just opening up the dialogue and giving startup studios, developers, researchers, people that are, you know, passionate about this industry, the access to some of these, you know, brightest minds in the industry, and doing so, you know, just to drive the industry forward. And I think we will be able to help a lot of people doing that. So we'll be kind of starting those things very shortly. We just literally figured out how to live stream on LinkedIn, so there'll be some LinkedIn lives being streamed as well.
How'd you get into that? Who do you know?
I know a few people on LinkedIn.
I've been queued up to get in LinkedIn Live for like 9 months, nothing.
I got accepted 6 months ago, and honestly, I wish I had spent a little bit more time earlier. I just didn't have time to deal with it until now. But I have 30,000 connections on LinkedIn. I don't know if you...
Too many.
That's a lot.
I get about 10 million views a year on LinkedIn. So,
so I've got some work to do.
They give you a golden ticket or something. I don't know.
Well, make sure you share. Make sure you guys share the show. I want to get to. You know, I've just crossed like 6,000. I got a long way to go to get to 30,000. Maybe you guys can help me.
There's a limit. Did you know that? There's a limit.
Yeah,
I didn't.
Yeah, there's a limit. 30,000 is the limit. You can't anymore. But
so I won't tell people to follow you on LinkedIn.
Aside from LinkedIn stuff, what I really also wanted to say is, we talked a lot about business opportunities and conferences and these sorts of things, but the educational opportunities of these platforms cannot be overstated. This is every student in the world is sitting at home, like children are upstairs, banging around upstairs, trying to learn from home. Every kid in the world is sitting at home, trying to learn through Zoom. And like, we have a golden opportunity to give the most powerful communication medium in the world to every student in the world. So I think we need to take this and see this opportunity to really drive that forward. The content needs to be easier to make. It needs to be faster. Like, there's a lot that needs to happen, but we are getting there. And if you're interested, there's a couple places you should look at with regards to that. You can listen to xrforlearning.io, which is my wife's podcast, XR for Learning. You can also go to Educators in VR. I believe it's a Discord channel, but you can go to Educators in VR, just Google it. And Steve Bambury has 1,000. He has just type in 1,000 VR and Steve Bambury. He's got a site where there's 1,000 VR experiences for students and for teachers. Where else for students and teachers?
I think Victory XR is doing some interesting work with the Engage platform. Steve Grubbs, and he's been doing virtual classrooms for people for I think the middle and high school ages, which has been really
Labster. There's a whole bunch, and we'll be part of the XR collaboration, initiative. That's phase one. That's like, okay, this is XR collaboration. There's also photogrammetry, videogrammetry, AR platforms, VR platforms, 360 platforms, educational content platforms. We want to be the one central source so that if you're looking for something, you can find it easily and get, do what you do best. And that's teach or learn or, engineer or whatever it is
Collaborate.
you do best. Collaborate. Here's the tools and get back to work, basically. Because it takes no effort at all. You email me a link on my Zoom, I hit click, and I'm part of the meeting. We need that kind of frictionless experience in these experiences. So we get there.
Yeah, so how do people get the white paper? Where do they find it? And I'll put a link down, but.
xrcollaboration.com.
Yep.
Awesome.
Easier.
Awesome. Guys,
and not only will the website be, not only can you download the PDF right off the homepage, but within a couple weeks, we're going to have the interactive tool online where you can, guide yourself to a short list of the tools that fit your needs best.
Well, make sure you let me know when that happens. I'll blast that out to my audience.
It's not review based. We're not making subjective analyses on the products. We're totally objectively looking at their functionality and your requirements and matching you up so that you can make the best decisions for yourself.
Yeah, save the editorialization for me.
There you go.
So guys, I really appreciate you joining and so much amazing information. Like my mind is blown.
Read the guide.
Yeah.
I don't know if Terry's up there or down there, but anyway, Terry and team spent a lot of time writing this. What is it, 65 pages or 63 pages?
Yeah.
And at the back of the very last page of the book, there's a diagram, and it's a holistic diagram of the entire industry by vertical. So there's education, engineering, automotive, and so you can just take a quick glance and say, okay, well, these are the ones I should be looking at. And then you can read the guide and understand which features are more important to you. But it's there. Please share it throughout the World XR collaboration. We want to get this in the hands of as many people as possible. So
Alan, when are we going to have V3 of the diagram ready? I know we're adding some new tools in. So
I believe it went live already this morning.
Oh, it did. Awesome.
V2. I don't know, man. I can't keep up. It keeps getting updated, so I posted it today. Today is the most recent one.
Cool. It's going to be a living document. So
So XR collaboration will be where it lives, and you can always just go there and get it.
Cool. Awesome. Appreciate your time, guys. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Bob. All right. Hey, Bob, thank you, brother.
Thank you so much. I love you guys.
Stay healthy. Stay healthy.
Yeah, you too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.